Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. So, joining me as always, it's the once and future king. It's Tom. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, friends.
Tom is joining us, and I give him that title because this week we are joined by Mr. Hooves of Doom. He's back on the show. Hooves, how you doing?
Doing fantastic. It's always good to be on Warhammer Weekly. So
it is great to have you back on, buddy. And this week we're going to talk about future releases because the world of Age of Sigmar, it's quiet right now because a massive storm is a brewing, and that's the 40K storm. We're going to talk about it a little here and there. We'll see how long
that already happened. The Gathering Storm already happened.
It's still going. It's still brewing. It's the Gathering Storm, Tom, part 1, 2, and 3. That means that now there is the storm. Storms gather, then they happen. So, we'll be talking more about 40K over time and stuff like that, especially once I can get Tom playing once the new edition comes out. Then that'll be, once he sees those Death Guard Nurgle models, don't worry. It's in the bag.
Nope.
It's in the bag, folks.
Nope.
It's happening, Tom.
Exactly. They'll release the Plastic Sisters. He'll have the Nurgle Death Guard. Boom. It'll just right in. I have no doubt. So, but for now, then this week, we are going to talk about some potential future releases as we imagine them. So it's time to strap on the tinfoil hats, folks, because we're going to let our imaginations run wild tonight during our feature segment. We're going to chart out some potential releases, what we'd like to see, what we might see, what we hope to see, however you want to phrase it, over the next year and a half, for Age of Sigmar, where we think things will go and how we would like to see those releases constructed based on everything we have thus far. I feel like the Kharadron Overlords are sort of we've got a lot of evidence now as to how releases go. We've seen how they're trending over time on the new releases. So it's time to do some crazy predictions. It's time to get in there. All right.
It's going to be bonkers.
Exactly.
Absolute bonkers.
But let's start with the news. Tom, what do you got, buddy?
So we'll open with the known first. We have the final week of KO dropping this week with our Aether Chemists, our Navigators, our Engine Masters, and then our Balloon, so our Sky Wardens and our Engine Riggers. And none of the heroes were priced surprisingly. 25 for in the US per hero. That's par for the course at this point. But those balloon dwarves were 3 for 40.
Was that more than you expected?
It was. Considering that we have like the Enlightened or your Skyfire sitting at 3 for 35. With seemingly more plastic on them than these dwarves on smaller bases. So it caught me by surprise. I think I was expecting either like a 3 for 35 or a 6 for 60. So the 3 for 40, I think, was a little bit surprising.
Well, but you got to think of how much more metal there is to paint on these guys. So metal equals, is costlier than plastic.
Right.
That's how it works. You see?
Okay. No. So that's dropping this week. Yay. I'm super excited. Don't get me wrong. What I will say is I'm super excited about the fact that my first very large order should be going into the mail soon.
Tom, how many boxes of Thunderers do you have coming?
Maybe 10.
Uh-huh. Is it 10, Tom?
It might be. The first wave is 10. Yeah.
Wow.
That's happening, people.
Yeah.
So
hey, I can't help that nice specialized weapons are selling for $10 a bit on eBay right now.
I hear you. That's fine. I'm excited for you to do that. But
I'm just saying these boxes sell themselves.
Sure.
That's all I'm saying.
I would just like to. Exactly. What I love is the journey we have taken here, Tom.
Yeah.
From week 1 of like meh to 10 boxes. Make it rain, people. Woo! You're gonna be like that, like Doom and Darkness did his retail therapy video, you know, where he was like laying on the couch, like covering himself in his Zeech boxes.
Yep.
I think you could make a competing video where you're just covering yourself in Kharadron Overlords.
Well, I will certainly. I mean, it doesn't help that I actually have like double the number of infantry boxes because I'm converting. You know, for those of you that have seen the pictures, like I'm converting all of them to like Fire Slayer,
Right.
all of them. So which means that like all of them have the crests, which mean that I need to literally like buy a Volkite box for almost every box of like foot soldiers that I have, which very rapidly increases the price of this collection. Let me just say.
Sure. Now the saving grace here is you're not going crazy on the boats.
Right. Like early on, I'm gonna. Yes. Yeah. Well.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Give him time.
Yeah. So I mean, my current list, my primary list is primarily a infantry one. In fact, my opening competitive list is like 100+ model infantry foot list for these organized. Yeah, and it is scary as hell, is what I would say.
Yeah, I bet.
Well, Tom, here's what I look forward to. I look forward to you being, hopefully you can stealth off some extra bits, save up some extra hobby money, and then you'll be ready to pick up that Death Guard. So I look forward to that. What were you going to say, Hooves?
Well, I'm just saying, I don't know how long he's going to be working on this project. Do you have any idea, Tom?
I don't know. I mean, like, I got my first 10, all of them built. I have my first sample model, like, painted and shaded. I don't have his base done, which is why I haven't shared him yet. And then I have like another one base coated, and then about half more almost. So I mean, like I'm a week into this project, and I have almost 10 guys done.
All right.
So I think I'm gonna move pretty quickly once I get everything down. Once I will say that Arcanite company, like they are a pain to paint. Just because the way they are divided, it's not easy. Like, let's say that you like prime in one color, that's only going to catch maybe 20 to 30% of your model. And so like, there's no easy way for painting the company. And it doesn't help that I'm adding like hair on top of it. So I'm adding another color on top of all these. So. It'll like, we'll see is what I'll say. I think I could have a sizable army painted by the end of the summer. That's what I would anticipate. Maybe by Nova.
I would agree. I think you're looking at like given your sort of paint speed, you put things together pretty fast at a pretty good quality. Good, so you know, if you look at your Nurgle stuff, I'd say you're probably on if you stick to it, you're probably on a 6 to 9 month rotation. Yeah, right, somewhere around that. Depending on how deep you want to go, right? Like
yeah. Yep. So we'll see. So, yeah, I feel pretty good about it.
So we can all look forward to 6 months of Tom answering Kharadron Overlords.
Exactly. Every single week.
Yep.
All right. What else we got, Tom?
So for this week, we'll talk about some of the other releases that were announced. The limited edition White Dwarf and Black Gobbo for Blood Bowl, which is pretty sweet. Like, we announced the limited edition White Dwarf 40th anniversary last week, but the 2 Blood Bowl models were kind of a neat kind of twist that dropped or that like went on pre-order this week. Pre-order, yes. Are they pre-order next week?
I think they go pre-order next week. Yeah, this coming week. Now, Hooves, you've been around the game for a long time, longer than myself, I believe. And
about the same. About the same.
We're both mid to late 90s people.
Yeah.
So the White Dwarf and the Black Gobbo well, I'm sure, going back in the day. What did you think of the new Black Gobbo? Like, forget the White Dwarf. He looked fine enough. He looked like, Grombardol more or less always does. What did you think of that Black Gobbo? I thought this was just an amazingly good goblin.
I'm sorry to say, I actually have not seen it yet.
Oh
man. Do you have any image I can take a look at?
What is this? Well, let's bring up the picture.
I know.
All right.
You got it?
So, Tom, keep going. I'll bring up the picture for that.
Yeah, so this is like a thing. This is like a named, like, this is the counterpart, which, let me just say, I was excited because I was like, man, maybe there is a future to Moon Clan. Like, there's really not. But I saw him and I was like, I don't know. This is like a Moon Clan conversion just waiting to happen. Come on, Vince. Where is he at?
Relax. Give it a second. Relax. Don't do it. Just, okay. There you go. All right. There you go. The Black Gobbo, the classic enemy to the White Dwarf. Yeah, I remember I remember back when he used to take over episodes of White Dwarf, right?
Huh.
Yep. It's just a night goblin.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Weird.
He looks super cool, that dude.
Yeah, I mean he does. Like at first it's real hard to see like where his face is.
Yeah, there's a couple better images of him, but this is the one I could find
Yes.
quickly and easily, which is with his stat card. So, hey, there you go. There's his stats, and for people who play Blood Bowl too. So,
Oh man. Strength too.
yeah, he's well, you know, he is. I'm pretty sure the way
He is a goblin.
yeah, here's the White Dwarf.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the way the rules for the White Dwarf and the Black Gobbo go, because there's a lot of different teams they can both join, obviously, is that you get them for free as long as the other one is also present on the other person's team. You understand what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to actually recruit them, pay for them, whatever you want to say. Like, you just get them, but they both have to be present. Otherwise, you can't use them at all, right? So, like, if one person wants to take the White Dwarf, the other person has to take the Black Gobbo, and then you both don't pay for him. I think is how it's going to work. So, kind of cool.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. The real big news, you know, I've obviously buried the lead here. The real big news this week was that leaked White Dwarf image for Warhammer Skirmish. I mean, I assume it was the White Dwarf image. For the Warhammer Skirmish, Vince, do you have that image?
Yes, I do. Oh my goodness, you're going crazy here with images. It's crazy. Yeah,
Come on.
Come on, Vince.
I'll tell you what.
So this dropped on Sunday, and within about 20 to 30 minutes, true to form, GW had an official announcement about with a clearer image of GW Skirmish. I'm sorry, AOS Warhammer Skirmish coming soon, and we got no additional information. I thought that we were going to be getting an article on this maybe on Monday, and we didn't get anything. We just got this image, and so. You know, the original image that leaked made it look like it was like a rules pack in the coming White Dwarf.
Well, yeah, something like that. But I know it's not in the May White Dwarf, and it's not listed in the June White Dwarf either, because they spoiled the June White Dwarf's contents or whatever.
Right.
Which is all about 40K, obviously. Let me tell you what's the thing that jumps out in this image to you, Tom?
No new minis.
That's not what. Well, I mean, true, but not what. It's fair. I mean, it's a fair point, but not what jumps out at me.
The foreground terrain.
The foreground terrain, I think, is a kit bash. Somebody asked if it's new. I think it's a kit bash, personally.
I don't think so, but we could argue that.
Sure.
And what I'm talking about, for those that don't see it, it's the terrain that's here in the front.
Yeah.
Those two little scatter pieces don't easily map to any other terrain pieces like that. Like I'm very familiar with, for example, the Garden of Moor and stuff like that, and that's not an obvious there's not an obvious connection point with Garden of Moor there.
I don't know, man. I've seen the open coffin before. These could be rusted spikes from pieces of the garden. That looks like the upside down tombstone. Like it just feels like something old they had sitting around, and then they turned on the smoke machine. No, what's interesting to me about this is we know it's mega multiplayer right out of the gate.
Yeah, you got orcs.
3 factions.
Yeah, we have
four factions.
Yeah, 4 factions here, right? We got the Flesh Eater Courts back here, some Iron Jaws, some Stormcast, and some Khorne. So super sweet.
And it looks like, I mean, if you want to read into that, you could say that it's maybe Warband-ish because it's like mono sub-faction.
Right. Right. And you see both regular troops and character-ish models, right? Obviously, character, normal guys, right? So,
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited for this. Obviously, a lot of people have been saying, is this the new Mordheim? No.
No, it's not. I mean, like Tony P came out, or not Tony P, the Hinterlands guy came out and said that this was not, sorry, I don't remember his name.
No, it's fine.
He mentioned that this is not Hinterlands related, and so this is not like a sanctioning of Hinterlands. So it's just not real clear what exactly it is. It's new, is what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just hoping for I'm totally down with a skirmish game. It can be fairly simple. Just give me some advancement, give me some way to injure and maim heroes and give me some, fun little treasure to find, and good for me. Good for me.
Yeah. No, it looks good. I would agree.
And the fact that it is big multiplayer is what I'm all about. Like, that picture told me I get to use my heroes, I get to use regular people, and I can play 4-player games. These are all necessary check marks.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because like all the best games in Wartime were 3-4 player games, right? It's one-on-one Wartime is not as interesting. You need the chaos factor.
The multiplayer factor, yes, certainly.
Yeah.
New this week, jumping back with the rumor engine. It was a very Blood Bowl-esque image. I had seen. I wish I would have saved it. Somebody linked one of the old Goblin teams from Blood Bowl, and like the weapon looked just like one of the little Goblin weapons that they're wielding for the old Goblin Blood Bowl team.
We'll share that up for people who didn't get a chance to see that one. Here we go. This one I was actually ready with.
So here's the rumor image.
And very quickly, because this comes up all the time.
Yeah.
It's not, yes, it's resin. No, it's probably not Forge World, because we're looking at a master, and the masters are in resin.
Yeah, masters are always in resin.
Right. So that tells me this is probably fairly far away, because this is rough, right? This is like a rough master. Like, look how not cleaned up that is in there.
Yeah.
I thought it looked like a big claw. More than anything. A lot of people said like a chainsaw, but I mean, maybe. I felt like it looked kind of like a claw.
Yeah, and I can see
claw there.
Yep. Well, like think Moon Clan. Like see the moon.
Yeah, there's the bad moon symbol.
The bad moon, like curved right here, the nose in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that's pretty bad moony to me.
Yeah, I mean, we're either looking at a Blood Bowl orky thing or a 40k orky thing, right? Like,
yep.
It's one of those two. It's definitely an orky thing, and it's definitely some kind of claw or chain claw or chain sword claw or whatever. Like, put all of those words together in whatever way suits you best, and I think that's what we're looking at. So,
and then the final not cemented release, or what we know the least about, is there's been some rumored new units for the Nurgle beyond the standard Death Guard. So beyond like the cult folks. And so potentially demons. Somebody mentioned a mix of drones and possibly Blade Kings. And so there seem to be some new possible maybe drone models coming, plague drones. Yeah, it was an interesting kind of rumor that hit.
That sounds weird. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I will say this, like, for 40K, I don't know about for 40K, but I mean, I know that if you look at the Rot Bringers as a sub faction, there's only one non-hero unit in that entire sub faction. There's Blade Kings. That's it. And so if they were to ever, renovate that faction, they would have to do it with additional units. Like, there's just they can't not do additional units. That would be like Arcanites just releasing with the Magister. or something, like, because originally, like, Arcanites, if you'll remember, for Zinch Arcanites, it was like the Magister and like one additional unit, maybe. It was like the Fate Master, maybe. Were the only two, units, and it would be like that type of thing. So, I mean, I would expect if they do a Rot Bringers, that this could potentially be related to that, or this could just be 40K, and this could be something related to the mutated, cultist people.
Well, let me say this. Theoretically, there's a big shakeup in 40K division, right? The way the armies are divided.
Yeah.
We don't, like, they haven't said anything about it yet, but like, we know it's Chaos, Imperium, and Xenos, right?
Yeah.
So if they're going to do Death Guard, which we know they are, because we've seen the models and stuff like that, right? We saw the big scythe that's theoretically like Mortarian or whatever how you say his name. We've seen the cultists, we've seen the Nurgle Marines. If you're going to release a brand new major push with this, if this is going to be a big thing, why not chuck some Nurgle demons in there too? Like, because my guess is we'll know more on Friday, because I think they're talking about building a battle force. But in the same way that they figured out in AOS, like, it's cool when you do the Chaos Gods and you can, very easily combine across Chaos. And even right now, 40K is pretty loose on, how you can have different alliances together. I see no reason why they wouldn't. Why not put out a bunch more Nurgle units? And if some can be cross-sold with AOS, you sell more boxes, right? I mean, like, there's no downside to it. If it can freely combine into your Death Guard forces and you can sell it to your AOS player base, seems pretty good to me, right? Like, and Nurgle has classically been very popular, so I don't know why. It's gross. But people seem to love it. Yeah. They do. Like, it's not, I do not get it, but people love it. So I think what we'll see is a pretty big release for the Nurgle stuff. I hope that they use this opportunity to do a new Great Unclean one. Like,
it'd be beautiful. I mean, it'd be horrid, but it's much needed.
I mean, I understand.
I would agree.
Out there, but I just do it. Just get it out there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, let's just get rid of all of the old dumb 90s.
No way, man.
Demons. Jettison these things. They're just awful. Every one of them, top to bottom. So, we've already replaced 2. Just keep it rolling.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
What about my cow? You got to keep that one.
Nope. The cow is gone. That freaking... Ugh. We might talk about that a little later. All right. So let's move to was there any other news items, Tom?
No,
is that everything?
I mean, it's a fairly quiet news week.
Right on. I think the one last thing as we're about a month away, we should mention NashCon, right? Yep. Talk about that. We're heading down there. That's June 3rd and 4th, right?
We are hypothetically heading down there, Vince. We are not registered yet.
Well, that's true, but I mean, come on. We're going to.
Let's hope that there's still spots when we get around to.
We have been accidentally too lazy, even though we told Dave we're going and then forgot to register because we got busy.
Yes.
Look, I already booked the dates with my wife, so that's really
I booked the dates with my wife too. Yeah. So even if we don't get in, I think we're doing a road trip.
Exactly. We'll just disappear, drive some other place. Exactly. We'll go out. We'll visit Hooves. We'll get some
come out to Colorado.
There you go. Exactly. It's an easy drive. That's a simple one-dayer, quick trip. All right. So let's then move on to some picks of the week. So Hooves, you are first, sir. What do you got?
All right. I've been so out of the hobby community for the last couple months that I can't rightly. I honestly have not been keeping up to date with a lot of the releases as much as I have in the past. So I'm going to actually point to one of my own videos I made in January. So
hey, that's okay. That. Self promotion is perfectly encouraged.
All right. So I made a video in January that looked at the end times that we all went through in 2014, 2015, just before the release of AOS, and then the current end times in 40K. Now, it's based upon 2 previous books that they released in the early 2000s, one of which is this book, A Storm of Chaos, right? This is 2004, and the year before, the Eye of Terror campaign. Now, these are both campaigns that they did at the time, and you used to go on the internet and put your results in. They were both pretty much statistical ties. There wasn't really any movement in the narrative whatsoever. And for the most part, the story never progressed. The Storm of Chaos campaign was pretty much just wiped out from, Warhammer history. Right. I always thought the Eye of Terror campaign was still a part of history, but they really just rehashed that in January with the release of the
Gathering Storm and such.
Gathering Storm books, and they basically redid the exact same thing, which I just think is funny because at the time they weren't willing to push the narrative, but now they clearly are. Yeah. And the fact that those 2 books came out within a year of each other back in 2000, and the fact that the current end times in both games about the same time too, because if you look at when this whole story arc began for 40K, it was about, it really began the start of last year, but you can actually trace it back to about the same time as the end times are going on for fantasy. So they they clearly had this
arc in mind.
Yeah, of it going forward like that. Now I just think it's really kind of and like I'm not really sure how they were planning it out that way, but I just, for me, as someone that's been in the hobby a long time, I just think that's rather interesting.
Yeah, no, that's a good observation. The other thing for the fantasy I would point in is that if you really wanted, I think a good in-depth analysis is worth exploring not only Storm of Chaos, but also Tamerkin. So if you've read the Tamerkin book from Forge World, and the movement of troops and all that, and what's going on in the Nurgle push, like that is Tamerkin. And then the other element that showed up in End Times was that there are aspects of the Elven story that shows up in other aspects from the developments that we saw in the Warhammer Age of Reckoning MMO. So if you looked at what happened in that game, there were a lot of parallels between what was going on there and then also what happened in End Times. And so I think that you could actually make a pretty convincing case of the End Times being a composition of Tamerkin, Storm of Chaos, and what was going on in the Warhammer Age of Reckoning storyline.
Yeah, sure. The one thing about that, though, like when it comes to the End Times, I mean, they had to, if they were to end the game the way they did, they would have to be along that type of arc.
Yeah.
But they don't have to necessarily copy this one.
Yeah.
In the Gathering Storm. Why they decided to rehash that almost completely the way they did is a little bit weird to me. But
well, it seems like it was a story element that they really appreciated or wanted to have canon, and maybe it didn't take the first time. Like, like they didn't push it far enough. Those elements, and so they felt like they needed to canonize it and solidify it.
Sure. So here's my question with the fantasy thing of that. Was there only one big story to tell in the old world that was actually impactful?
No, there weren't. There were multiple stories.
And yet they told the same story. What you're alleging is they told the same story 3 times before they told it the final time.
No,
right?
What I'm saying is that I think that the End Times is bigger than any one of those other 3 stories.
Sure, and it's got strong echoes of all of those. I'm not saying I think that's true. I'm saying, did they think that was the one story worth telling, and that's why they told some variation or shade of it 4 freaking times?
I don't think that it was the same story each time. That's what I would say. I think Tamerkin is different. The story in Tamerkin is different than that of Storm of Chaos. Both of those are different than what you end up seeing in like Kane with the invasion of Ulthuan.
Right.
Which is, had heavy echoes if you looked at what happened in Warhammer Age of Reckoning, with them landing the Black Hearts and stuff like that. And so what I would actually say is that I think they wanted to finally do it a service well. And I think that there were stories that were the stories worth telling, and they wanted to pull all those together in the Great Send-Off, is what I would say.
Sure.
All right.
I think one of the problems in the Warhammer world as they built it is that they have a variety of enemies which are always potentially the worst thing that humans could ever confront, right?
Right.
Like with the orcs or the Skaven, if these things had actually been in an alliance together, they would very clearly have been a major problem for the Empire and whatnot. But the enemy in both games, by Games Workshop's standpoint, like the if there is one enemy that they have always liked and always try to push the narrative, it would be a chaos, really, more than anything else.
Sure. And I think that when you look at chaos, they couldn't just go around and start flipping empires out of existence, right? Because the second you do that, you're basically invalidating an entire army.
Yeah.
Right. So you can't have you can't have the empire fall and become ashes and all that stuff is no longer there on the old system, right? On the old world.
Yep.
Because it was one of 15 armies. It was too invaluable. You can't kill a whole product line because you want to tell a story about an empire that by all accounts should have been destroyed forever ago actually getting destroyed, right?
Yeah.
So like if they wanted to do anything hyper meaningful, it's almost like all there was, the only settings were one, nothing really changes, right? Like things are lost, territory switches hands, blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying that can't be a meaningful story. You can have a good story with characters we care about. Not everything needs to be world ending. But like if we're talking about world changing, they either have to keep the stat when we take it above the character level. It either has to keep the status quo or blow everything up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. The one element that I don't think takes. So I identified 3 elements that were answered. So one story element that was explored in like the end times, for example. And this is a tangent. I apologize.
Sorry.
That didn't show up in any of those other storylines is the return of Nagash. And so it's a culmination of that undead / Tomb Kings storyline.
Well, and to be fair, he had come back. That was his 3rd, 4th time he had come back in the story.
But we knew this was happening. Like we knew that where this was going.
Yeah.
And what I would say, and why I think let me say it this way: why that's significant is that I think most stories came to a culmination. Like the trajectories of most of the stories. I mean, that's a lot of what the end times was. The one exception, obviously, to that would be the Lizardmen / Sheriffon. Man, if anybody got the short end of the stick story-wise, it was those guys preparing for the end of the world, and then it shows up, and they're like, "We're out.
We weren't ready.
We weren't ready." Millennia of preparing. Wasn't ready.
Exactly. Yeah. Like apocalypse, just 3,000 years of planning for nothing.
So
all right.
One other thing about this piece too is that the arch enemy in the Storm of Chaos and of course the end times is Archaon, and in Eye of Terror it's Abaddon, and those two are pretty much the same character. I mean, for all intents and purposes.
Yeah. Yep. It's the meaningful nature of that foe, right? This this undivided kind of ultimate champion of chaos.
Well,
all right,
we'll
good
see
stuff.
If that develops. Anyway,
it's a good vid. I love that vid, so I'll link that below. All the picks will be linked down below. Tommy, what's your pick of the week?
I'm gonna pimp. I mean, it's kind of my it's not my video, but I was in it. I mean, as are all of my appearances.
Aggrandizing self-promotion. Go.
Well, again, it's not really mine. I'm gonna pimp Mitch's MC1 Gamers video. Him and I, a little over a week ago, did a unlocking of the Kharadron Overlords, and which it's gotten a decent number of hits already. And where Mitch and I walk through KO and kind of the major movements of the faction, and kind of what I would argue is probably you're gonna see in competitive. So we kind of hit the high points of the force, and then I present 3 lists, which is standard for the unlocking format. But what I did instead of doing like a 1,000, a 2,000, and 2,500, which is the normal format, I did 3 2,000 point lists. None of them are what I would consider hard edge lists. That's not what I was going for. Okay. One was like an all comers kind of like experiencing the full range of like options for the KO list. So it had some like balloon dwarves and some some heavy troops and some boats and just kind of all the stuff. And it would be relatively competitive. I mean, it's not like a hyper competitive list, but it's not a super hard, but it would be a fun, like all comers playable list. The next is a mixed list with Fire Slayers. And so it was all Fire Slayers KO list. I can't say it's all Fire Slayers KO because technically there's a Huracanum in there. But there's that mixed list of infantry with some shooting support from the Arcanaut companies, and then the last list was a mixed all Duardin list, which so it was like Dispossessed, Fire Slayers, and KO. Cool. And so just again, none of these are like hyper competitive, but the idea is that they'll be all comers, like kind of fun lists to put together and be able to put models on the table and still have some fun with these, because so much of what our analysis has been mono KO, and I wanted to kind of push out of that and say like, hey, what are some other ways that we could maybe use these guys? So yeah,
cool. For myself, my pick of the week is going to be a hobby-related thing for another week in a row. Specifically, there was an awesome, and I get this question a lot about the combination of hot and cold colors and the interplay between them. And Figure Mentors, there's a guy who's working on his entry for the duel for the upcoming Golden Demon at Warhammer Fest. And so he has a dwarven like slayer fighting a banshee on sort of a circular set of stairs. And the right side of the piece with the banshee is cold, and the left side of the piece with the dwarf is all hot. And it's a really, really cool piece. And he walks you through like step by step how he sets the colors, what it means to have these play off each other, what using hot and colds mean, how he constructs his shadows and his highlights differently. It's really cool. He uses all, well, I don't think he uses all, but he uses a lot of like GW paints, common paint ranges. He doesn't pick a lot of weird stuff. So it's a real cool article if you're interested in that kind of interplay or making your models high contrast or popping. You know, he's doing it over 2 models to set a scene, but you could do it over 1 to just get an interesting single model. I think of last year's Slayer Sword winner of the Mega Boss, right? Who was that same thing. He was hot and cold, the blue armored Mega Boss standing over the lava. Is another example of that. So check it out if you're interested in that sort of thing. I'll link down below. Find it after the show. All right. So let's turn to some hobby time. So Hooves, buddy, have you gotten your hobby mojo back? What's on the table, man?
Oh man, I've been trying. I was held up by a work-related project, but it just ended May 1st, or most of it. So I'm kind of like constantly trying to get back on the horse. Hopefully I can get out those Empire Spearmen I started later this month. But right now, they're still on my hobby desk from January. So shameful.
Ouch. Well, that's because you picked Empire Spearmen.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's just not compelling.
Here's what I'll say. You have gamified your painting, right? That's what you did. It's gamification. You made it so you roll out on this charts what you're working on next, right?
Right.
And gamification is generally good. It turns menial tasks into something interesting. The problem is you constructed the reward, the incentive at the end of your gamification negatively because you included Empire Spearmen. You went for the like categorical, let me put everything I own on this list.
Yeah, true.
But there's a lot of landmines in that list that if you roll them up, say Empire Spearmen, right? The Spearmen I have too are like from the 90s too, so like they're older models. And they're not even ones I'm planning on using in my army. So it's like the worst motivation. You are finish these.
You are setting yourself up.
Yeah, you need to just like finish your base coats, wash, done. Put them to the side. Okay, just burn your way through it in an evening and just call it a day. Like put them up. That you painted them. They're done. That's as good as they need to be.
No, wait, man. These are going to be.
Find something you love.
Empire Spearman you've ever seen, all right?
No.
Wait, yeah, I know. There's no way I can do that.
Put that idea to the side. Like you have such an impressive collection. All right. There has to be something that you would just love to paint. So set your system to the side for a moment. Pick the number one thing, one model in your collection you want to see painted. Some probably 40K thing in advance of 40K coming back. A character, a marine, a something, a tank.
The thing is that my other project that's supposed to be ongoing is Imperial Guards. I got like a ton of guardsmen, which are the equivalent of Empire Spearmen.
Yeah, this is terrible. This is terrible.
You do not want to finish painting. That's what you've done.
Yeah. Well, I think because like I was like I'm gonna get these finished, months ago. Right. Now it's like, well, why even bother? But I'm gonna try to get them done this month. And hopefully, move on.
All right. Yeah. If by June I don't see some completed spearmen, you're gonna get an email from me like, wash, put them to the side, pick something fun. Having passion about what you're painting is the most important thing.
So true.
I agree. But for me, see, I love all my models and all my armies.
But do you
Don't
though?
we all?
I do, unfortunately, which is why it's a big problem for me.
Sure, but do you love them all equally? That's
I
what I
do,
have.
Vince. I
trouble
do.
with. Yeah, like exactly. It's just like Tom.
They're all
He's got a
amazing.
favorite kid. He won't admit it, but there's one of them that's the favorite. Okay, everybody's you love them all, but one of them is the favorite.
Not
All
true,
right.
children. If you're watching this years down the road, I love you, and it's not true.
All right, so it might be you. You don't know. Who knows? All right, so, all right. For Tom, what about you, buddy? What do you got? What's on your hobby desk? I bet I know. It's not. Is it not really Fire Slayers? It's KO. There you go. All right, hold on. Let's lock on Tom. There we go.
Yup.
Look at that drilled out gun barrel. What? There we go.
For a first glimpse. So that's a little bit better lighting. Without drill down.
Without drilled out gun barrel, yes.
Yep. So yeah, there we go. So it's happening. So
Cool.
yeah,
Very nice.
super excited. It'll be neat. It'll be fun.
Is this is this the test model you have?
Yeah,
is
this is. I mean, he's not fully done, but
Right.
it's like I was trying things on him and seeing kind of what I wanted. So I have lots of like orange fiery glow on the models. Originally, I was going to do like blue runes. So I was going to do the hot and cold, like magic glow, hot, magic glow, cold. I may still do the cold glow on some of the weapons,
right.
with dwarven runes. I'm just not sure yet. So I have to be careful with that if I do another magic color.
Yeah, and then obviously you don't want to get yourself into a paint scheme so complicated that it's going to be impossible to repeat over.
Yes.
You know,
And you do have like 100 models. To do,
I do. There's like
some
100 of these
ridiculous
guys
number.
coming.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're very hard to paint. Let me just say that they are not obvious or intuitive. Yeah. So, anyways, yeah, it's coming along.
Very cool. All right, so for myself, I'm in the middle of a big project that I have overcomplicated.
Yep.
Because that's what I did. I just kept going. So I'll spoil the base for Sigmar. It's not done yet. There it is. Look at that. There you go.
wow.
How about that? Yes. I'm not gonna put anything on this base. How about that? I mean, it'll be painted, but beyond that, we're going hyper minimalist for his personal base, for Sigmar's personal base. Complete opposite of normal. Why? Because this isn't his real base. This is just what he happens to be standing on if I want to play him. Because his normal base, his real base, this will slot into his real base, which will be, hold on, I have it still in pieces. Ah!
Careful, Vince.
I'm dropping stuff. I'm dropping stuff. Oh, God. It's all falling apart. All right, there we go. All right, which is normal base will be the like forging room where he makes his Stormcast. And we have, this is still very raw, obviously. And there's a little Liberator who stands in the middle there who's getting his shield and his helmet put on him. And this will have the Celestial Huracanum stuff on top of it, probably. So that goes up there. There we go. And this will be a painted background that'll look out a window to like the floaty red planet and space at Space Station Sigmar. So,
Which, let me just point out, was in the 40K video.
it's in the 40K video. It's like Mars or whatever, but Mars looks like Space Station Sigmar, just like more advanced. Like the planet got bigger
in the future.
Yeah. So that'll be his real base, and this is going to take a while. And unfortunately, I have to travel all of next week. There's no way this is getting done by this weekend.
Hey, Vince, how about you show us that cloak?
I'm not going to show the cloak because it'll look like crap. I'm going to finish this before I leave. Like what I'm going to do is paint marble, and he's going to be standing on like a lion head, right? Like a design in the middle, and I'll finish him, and then I'll share him, and then the room, like the piece will just be called like reforged, because the idea of the Liberator is that he's not. You can see like his human head, and he has a normal arm and stuff, and he's getting suited up by the magic.
We leak stuff for GW all the time. Ought to start leaking Vince's images, like for his like current project. Like, oh, what's this? This is a corner of a cloak. What's going on here?
Oh, and there'll be lightning in here too. Did I mention the lightning? I have to model lightning jumping between the balls and the thing. The
that'll be
empowerment.
easy. Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah, easy, no problem.
Well, no, but he did that with the Thunder Giant or the Storm Giant.
Yes.
And like with the paper clips, it looked really nice.
Yes. It's just paper clips. So this has a lot to it. Oh, and the columns will have stuff hanging from them, and it just stuff, whatever.
Yep.
Who cares?
So
And you're gonna
minimalist.
work on some marble too, right?
So minimalist, probably not the best description for what this is.
For this base, it's only going to be, it'll be marble and then a big freehand image painted in the middle. That's quite minimalist by my basing standards. Unfortunately, his real base is this massive room. I have to build a room and do a freehand painting on the background of Space Station Sigmar. I think that's minimal. So there you go. All right. So let's get on to the future our future talk here, our feature segment. So we know right now the rumors are kind of dry of what's coming in Age of Sigmar. So I thought it would be fun to do some predictions. It's prediction time, folks.
Well, no,
Right.
This is not prediction time. This is straight tinfoil hat theory time.
Call it what you will. This
It's
is
prediction time.
That's right. This is a mix of insane wish listing, ridiculous, unlikely predicting, tinfoil hatting. Just throw it all in the mix. We're going to talk about, each of us are going to take a single release we would love to see over the next year and a half. Now, what I'll ask is here's the rules for how you define it, okay? And we're going to talk about the release, what's included in this imaginary release that we're constructing here, and all that kind of thing. But everybody's got to give a rating, okay, for how likely you are to see this release.
So the audience
constructed it. No, you.
Or how? Okay.
Us. We have to give this, right?
Yep.
For how likely we are
Yeah.
to see a release like what we're describing. Doesn't have to be exact, obviously, because we're not going to get that. That would be weird.
Yeah.
But like, you know, something like what we're seeing. You got to give yourself an X out of 10. 1 being never going to happen. 10 being you might as well go. You can pre-order the book now. Okay. Fair enough?
Yep.
Fair enough.
All right. So, Hooves, you're the guest, buddy. You know what that means on this show. You get to go first.
Yeah,
that's right. That is correct. You get to go first.
All right. Well, I happened to be on a website just this morning, and it may have been Hooves.com, but in either case, I'm pretty sure I'm going to give myself 100% that this army is coming out. All right.
10 out of 10.
You must have go pre-order the book. All right.
Okay.
No, it's probably 0. Frankly, I don't know. So I sent you a few images, but first off, do you guys know all three of us played Hero Quest back in the day? What is that?
That's a Fimir.
That's right, a Fimir. And that is the army that I want to see come out.
Yeah, that's already out.
Year.
You know, that's
wow.
Forge World.
Come on.
Like they just released.
I'm talking a full release here.
Released models for it.
Which is what we're going to talk about. They
okay. Yeah, they just released the Noble. Yeah, they just released the Noble. Yeah, like that's a thing.
But
I don't know.
A few months ago.
Yeah, he was out a few months back. He's in this picture lot I'm going to share. Let's lock it on. Let's talk about it.
Okay, so
of 3 infantry guys and 1 character who's actually like in charge of the squad.
But it's not a character. It's just the champion.
Yeah, I know. What the hell?
All right, so construct this Fimir release for me.
Well, I mean, so these were an army while they were in Hero Quest, and then they actually came out in the early 90s with this army. It's kind of a bizarre type of creature that I believe they lived in the swamps, so they're constantly in the mist and such. And so that's something that I would talk about in the future release. And I want a lot of the rules to deal with that mist. These are larger sculpts. They're comparable like ogres or something like that. Yeah. But the Hero Quest model is not. It's just a regular dude. My understanding is that there was a miscommunication between the artist and the person who sculpted the models. in the 90s, and then they decided to go with the models which are a bit bigger. Now, I would want to release that smaller, more on the side of regular infantry. You can still keep these, but the rest of the army is going to be along the same scale as the Hero Quest model. So could you go to the rules sections for a second there?
I sure can. Oh, sorry, wrong thing. There we go. Rules. Okay.
That's all right. Yeah, so they have like a spiky tail. So that's something I'm going to keep kind of in the rule set going forward. They can regenerate wounds. That's something that I kind of want to keep as a consistent rule. And then they do have a rule regarding the mists, which I would expand upon. But did you want me to kind of explain my first hero?
Yeah, man. Walk us through it. So we challenged ourselves here to talk about 2 heroes, a battle line unit, some other unit, and a behemoth if it exists for the army. So go ahead. Walk us through what this force looks like. Broad strokes.
All right, broad strokes. So everything's named after mist, all right? So basically, if you think of a Khorne army, you're just going to replace the word a blood with mist, essentially. So I would have the first character is like it's basically like a spellcaster. I was thinking, because they're surrounded in these mists, that this spellcaster would have like
a mist walker.
A mist, exactly, that type of lingo, precisely. All right. Yeah, I actually had them all written down, but I want to explain them all. So he would project on the battlefield an aura of mist that would go across the entire battlefield. And I actually, the way I had it was the entire battlefield, but I think that would be a mistake because you'd probably just hide him in the corner. This is a spell, and basically you would reduce the range on ranged attacks for every unit on the battlefield, which would be rather handy with the recent armies that have come out in the past year. I also think you could have all enemy units -1 to hit in close combat. And of course, to make sure that this spellcaster isn't killed immediately, you'd have to have some sort of mechanic so that any units that arrive on the battlefield after the first turn aren't able to eliminate him immediately. But it's kind of a quirky mechanic, and the spell, as I envision it, because it's so central to the strategy, wouldn't have a casting value. But he's very stunted and weak. His stats are terrible. I was thinking about 3 wounds, something like that, and without any armor. So you really have to keep him, towards the back of the army and kind of move him away from any potential threats. Basically, your opponent's constantly trying to get at this guy because he's, potentially so powerful. The second hero is a melee guy, and he also is augmented by the mists. So he has a decent combat profile with above average wounds, but very low armor, although he would be immune to rend. If he's taking any damage, then in your next hero phase, he heals back to full. I decided to do that because that's pretty much the rules as they currently are for the existing models.
Right.
But providing the mist is active, enemy models within 12 have an additional -1 to hit within an aura as well. Now, it's not nearly as large as the spellcaster version, but if you can keep the spellcaster alive and both these mists are going, then that would be a nice cohesive way to be fairly. It's not so much your units to be good, but your opponents would not be as good as they're struggling to kind of move around these mists. All right.
Okay.
So the first battlefield unit that I was thinking of is a melee unit along the same lines as the little Hero Quest guy. All right.
All right.
So
is he smaller than these guys? Like, are these guys
Yes.
sort of are these guys becoming your elite warriors? Because I assume you're keeping this
Basically, yes. Yeah.
group.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these guys would be on the exact same scale as the Hero Quest model. All right.
Okay. Got it.
So I'm not really sure what to do with these guys. I just wanted a weaker version of the ones available currently through Forge World. I was thinking basically because you can't do regeneration that well if the models have 1 or 2, but you could do something like a Death Army, where every hero phase the unit would get back a certain number of models returned back to the unit, which I think would be kind of an interesting way to work with that concept of regeneration.
Sure, it'd almost be functioning like old school Necron.
Yeah, exactly.
Redundant systems or whatever.
Warriors.
Right? Yeah.
So they would have a weaker version of the rules as they are currently, but they would still have a tail attack and a few other, basically the same type of rules, but just on a weaker scale. Not as many wounds, obviously, because they're not as large.
Yeah. So I mean, I think in this world, what's happening here is you're talking about we've got the little Fimirs that look more like the old school, still keep the tails.
Yeah.
Everybody's moving around. What I'm seeing in the broad strokes of the army you're describing, and I don't hate this idea. I'll save my how likely I think it is for when we get to the end. But
Sure.
But I'll tell you why I honestly do actually really like this idea. The Fimir are super old school. They're pretty classic. There'd be a different take on a destruction army because they would be associated with shadows and that kind of stuff. That's very different than the two rampaging forces we have so far, right? The current destruction forces are very much like roar, stompy stomp.
Yeah,
it'd be neat,
absolutely
a more stealthy destruction, right? Because these guys are destruction based now, which I love. They used to be chaos.
They are.
No, they've shifted over. I think that's fantastic.
They're perfect.
Yeah, they just hate everything else and want to kill it. That's why they're destruction, right? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
I'm down with that.
Yeah, and so the other infantry unit is basically along the exact same scale. This is a ranged unit that does. So the Fimir, they have one eye, and so I'm going to kind of use that. They're not going to shoot laser beams or something stupid, but something along those eyes.
Oh, they.
So
totally
again,
are. They are totally shooting laser beams.
Sure, I'm cool with that.
Sorry, missed.
I would assume
Sure,
you want to do a baleful gaze, like the old, the
something
snakes,
like that,
right? Like the Tomb King snakes. Yep.
Yeah. So again, because they're spellcasters, they're really weak, but they have kind of this cool shooting attack. So they'd be terrible in close combat, absolutely atrocious. But they have this kind of quirky shooting attack that they can shoot through their eyeball. All right. And relatively short range, because the mist would also, actually, I think I had it down that the mist would not have an impact on them.
Right, they can see through it or whatever. Sure, they have a shooting attack that ignores the penalty. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what I was thinking for the shooting attack, I don't want just 3 up to hit, 3 up to wound, -1 damage or something. I want something that's quirky. This whole army, in some ways, is designed to make existing mechanics work backwards, or just have kind of a quirky rule set to them. So I kind of drew inspiration from this little bad boy, Archon the Black, and he has a spell, right, which you roll a bunch of dice. If you roll 6s, you re-roll those. If you roll 5s, you re-roll those. If you roll 4s, you re-roll those. Each of those is going to cause wounds. And most of the time when you're doing spellcast, it's probably statistically the same as like an arcane bolt, right? It does a couple wounds at best, most of the time. Once in a blue moon, though, I've had it do 9 or 10 wounds, right? And it just destroys anything. That's kind of what I'm envisioning with these. So you'd have a fairly sizable unit. They're not necessarily going to be.
They're not like 3-packs or something.
No. It'd be a regular unit number, and their hit and wound rolls are atrocious. but their damage is amazing. So like
Gotcha.
most of the time you might get 1 or 2 through, but sometimes you're gonna get a bunch of them through. So like the potential for damage is completely random with these guys, which I think would be kind of fun. All right. So the other unit, and this is kind of like a random unit, this was kind of hard for me to decide based upon sticking with this particular army. I wanted something that's fast and agile. And so I was thinking like, kind of like a blood rack that the Dark Elves have. Yeah, exactly. So it's something that's very fast and agile. Just 1 or 2 models that you could have, probably quite a bit of points. Doesn't have a lot of wounds. It doesn't do any really damage, but it has a short-range attack that you roll for every model of the unit. And again, you have to roll pretty high. But if you do roll and wound models, that unit can't move in the next movement phase. It basically it turns them into stone, which I think would be kind of an interesting mechanic, again, because you have these mists that you can't quite see that far, you can't quite attack that far, and then you have potential to not even be able to move your units. So you're constantly getting hit by, the ranged attack from this army, the Fimir. Again, that was kind of a weird choice. I didn't really know how to shape it the way I wanted. Now, for the behemoth option, because of course you have to have a behemoth.
Right.
I was thinking initially one of these little guys, one of the actual warriors, on top of a really big warrior. But I think that would actually be stupid. So I
think it'd be pretty amazing.
All right, well, but actually, so during this little campaign in 2001, they came out with this big creature from the swamp. Ooh. And it was actually kind of a small scale.
Swap thing.
Not very big. Yeah. But I was thinking, what if they had a big one of that with one of these little guys on top?
Oh, yeah.
Which would be kind of cool. All right. Now, it gets, again, because the army's quirky, I'm trying to reverse things as they normally work. Normally, the monsters, as they take wounds, to get weaker. I'm going to reverse that. So as it takes more wounds, it gets more and more enraged. And it would do more damage. And at a certain point, it gets so mad that it grabs the warrior on his back and throws him at the enemy. Okay? So it would do a bunch of mortal wounds immediately. But thereafter, even if it heals back up,
it loses that attack line or whatever.
It loses that attack profile. Now, of course, because of the theme of the army is the potential to recover wounds, it would also have that mechanic as well.
Yeah, sure. I've got a couple thoughts on that. So,
Sure.
When I think about like sort of creatures you could pull on or ideas, concepts, I think of the Catalopius or Catalopodobos or whatever the heck they're called from D&D. They're like these weird swamp cows that they keep their heads down in the water, but they have like a death gaze. They're just like cows. They don't attack anything. They're just dumb cows. But if they look up at you, they can basically kill you. Like they have a death gaze. Okay.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting if these guys just kept those death cows around. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
And just kind of herded them into the fight. And then you like the thing never, as a player, you're still moving it around and doing stuff with it, but it doesn't really attack, in any significant way.
Yeah.
Its abilities mainly come when people either get near it or attack it directly, right? So it becomes this weird kind of objective monster because it can just like walk up and squat on objectives, and then the enemy has to come peel it off. And in doing so, they kill themselves against it, right?
Right,
so,
exactly, yeah.
It's pretty weak, but the more powerful the thing is that attacks it, the more likely it is that they die because of could be wound reflection, could be bravery,
I like that.
death, could be horrendous automatic battle shock tests that automatically treat it as rolling a 6. Like there's all sorts of different options you can do, right? To bring it, because the army you've constructed here to me, I think is pretty cool. It's a destruction army that relies on fear. I think most of this army would have garbage saves.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
They would be super easy to wound, and they would be relying on basically like negatives to hit, right? Especially in shooting.
Yeah.
To survive. Because like for instance, even in this base Fimir warrior, this dude's got a 4-up, but he goes 3-up against shooting attacks and has a 5-up like mortal wound shield against those things.
Yeah.
I think this is the only, like, if you keep these, this is simply the most heavily armored thing in the unit. I think most of them are like 6-up or outright no saves. They rely on like regeneration and penalties and kind of ambushing out of the mist, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And in fact, if we were going to do that, it would be neat to have, I would say, here's how you do the mist thing without making it the whole table. You do it like the Sylvaneth, where their spellcaster can cause mist to infest particular pieces of terrain. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
And then that terrain counts as enshrouded in mist, and they can like teleport like the Sylvaneth from misty enshrouded terrain piece to enshrouded terrain piece, right? They can't move across open ground because that's just it. That's open ground. That's where it's dangerous for them, right?
Sure.
So you'd have to like, it would put them in conundrums where they want to be in their particular terrain. They would play somewhat like Sylvaneth, but a more offensive Sylvaneth, right? Because like they still have no saves, but they're all about just breaking things hard. Like they smash face.
I like it.
This unit here is like the regular guys make 3 attacks with a -2 rend weapon. You know what I mean? Like, let's not. Yeah. That ain't no joke. I think that's a real cool concept for a different sort of destruction army than what we've seen before. And Fimir are super classic. I love bringing back
absolutely
old classics like that. All right, so what's your real rating? What is your chance that we see a Fimir army?
Well, to be honest, I guess they made the regular warriors a number of years ago.
Right.
But they just came out with that new unit champion, like just recently. So it's on some sort of priority list, I guess, somewhere. But I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, because I wasn't expecting the Overlords quite the way that they had them.
Well, that's just it. That's the fun of this. Like we truly do live in a world where anything's possible. Like I think I would give the likelihood of this army as you've constructed it about a 2. Okay, out of 10. Now, that being said, if tomorrow,
that's not bad.
No, it's like, here's the funny part. That being said, if tomorrow it came out that like this Fimir army was launching this fall, I'd be like, yeah, sure, I believe that.
Yeah, well, GW is so unpredictable at this point, though.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like I don't think it's likely. But I wouldn't have thought something that looked like the KO was likely either. So, there we go. Tom, what's your vote? What do you think likelihood?
Probably 2.
All right. What do you think of the army?
Say what?
What do you think of the army he's constructed here?
I think it's interesting. I think that it offers something unique to destruction, which is hard to do.
Yeah, it builds out a faction that I think is criminally under supported. Like we could talk about that for death too, right? It adds a new play style to that faction, which I like. I'm always down with that. More ways to play, more ways to get people into other factions is a good thing. And it pulls on the classic nostalgia feels of me getting my Hero Quest board out when I was, 10 years old or whatever. So I'm all about that. I say you got a winner here. All right, GW, listen up. We want the all Fimir army. Let's do this. All right. Good stuff.
That would be amazing.
It would be amazing. Let's face it. All right. Cool. I love it. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. And I love the idea of unusual monsters. Like a monster who's a behemoth whose real job isn't to attack. He just kind of wanders around and kills things that come near him. Sounds pretty fun to me. Just a giant cow roadblock. I think that's cool. All right. Cool. Tom, you're up, buddy.
Well, if you all thought that I was going to do anything but Spider Fang, you are out of your damn minds.
I did think you might do something other than Spider Fang. I wasn't. We didn't talk beforehand, by the way, because I didn't care about the fact we might both pick the same thing because I knew we weren't. That was just never going to happen.
Sure.
I thought you might have picked elves. Like that's everybody who's watching.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking you might.
Yeah.
You'd either pick elves or your goblins. It was a 50-50 shot. Flip a coin. Let's be honest.
So, because the reality is this, I think that out of the two, I think that Spider Fang have a clearer picture of a way forward.
Okay.
Than elves. And what I mean by that is like we've gotten not really any glimpses of what elves are going to be in the lore at all. Like, and so like for me to begin just throwing out guesses on elves, I can't, those can't be informed guesses. But Spider Fang,
I don't remember any part of this being informed, but all right, continue on.
Well, I'm aiming for a 7. You need to understand, I'm aiming for a 7.
All right, you're trying to get a 7 rating from us. All right, sounds good.
So I'm aiming for like a highly likely release in the next 1.5 to 2 years.
Okay.
Let me just 2
years. Come on now.
And let me just say, GW, I was the one that was like, hey, give me Skyship Dwarves a year ago. And they are sitting on my table right now.
Yeah, you alone asked for that amongst the sea of all Warhammer players.
True. It's true.
So weird.
But I'm on public record for it. So so what I would say is that GW, the Spider Fang, we want them. And it's low-hanging fruit, and this is how I would trot out this force. Okay?
I'm ready.
We don't have a Grot force yet. So let me open with that. So I think we are loaded and ready for a Grot release, and I think Spider Fang is the newest or the most likely of those. Now, I'm going to do this a little bit different, and this is kind of counter to some of GW's recent releases. But I think that, like, I'm going to suggest that maybe they're going to condense some of the boxes, and we may get heroes in other kits, like Flesh Eater Courts. So you remember Flesh Eater Courts would have like the additional bits that they would throw into a kit and allow for like building heroes out from a unit.
Okay.
Yep.
Just because I think GW is going to keep us on our toes, and I think that I think they're going to we've been watching them zig and they're going to zag. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. Okay. And so, I'll detail one hero that I think that we might see, which is Creeper Stinging Death, which is an assassin hero, and he's going to be like one of the little mutated spiderlings. And so he's on a bunch of extra legs and the big cloak, not unlike the Black Gabo. And he's going to have a bunch of extra legs, and he's going to be all sneaky. Probably like deep strike deployment, pops out, jumps, within 6 inches of an enemy hero, can open with that charge and stabby. Maybe he can scuttle away if he kills his target, something like that. So I can definitely see Mr. Creeper showing up. But I think a lot of the other heroes, I think that we'll probably see them like rolled into other boxes. I don't know why, other than I think that GW is going to switch things up on us. I think we've seen them go one direction, and I think that one thing that this does is this reduces shelf space by them condensing boxes with heroes and other units, and it forces people into larger sales by doing something like that. And so I don't know, I could see them doing something. So for my battle line. So I'm going to talk about heroes. I'm going to talk about heroes as I'm talking about other units and how they could be rolled into these other units. So for my battle line, I'm going to suggest, I think spiderlings would be included in the line, like what we got in the Silver Tower, like the goblin spider, the night goblin, like the bows and the spears and the kuttas.
The scuttlers.
I think they're in there. They'll probably be battle line, but I don't want to talk about those because they're boring. And they're a known quantity. Yes, they're going to show up in the line probably, but nobody really cares about that. What we're all interested in is we're interested in probably the other conditional battle line. I think there are going to be 2 battle lines. It's probably one of the conditional ones. And I think you're going to get a new unit of swarms of spiders. So lean the other direction. And I think a lot of what this release is going to do is that rather than it being all grots, I think that you're going to lean more into a lot of mutants and or a lot of pure spiders.
Okay.
So it's going to be more bestial as a force than just the pure like Spider Riders or the Ragnaroks or stuff like that. I think those things will probably be there. But I think that this would be the design direction would be different, would be the mutation, leaning in the mutations, leaning into the lone spiders. And so one of those would be just a unit of these like 32 mil base spider swarms. 2 to 3 spiders per base. It'd be a lot of modeling opportunities. And there may be a handler type of rule, maybe a hero if a hero is nearby X or whatever. And just masses of these spider, like little baby spider swarms. So I think that might be an interesting battle line unit. We don't have any swarm units really that are serving as battle lines. It's not unlike though the Molder like rat swarms.
What if you had a Prince Apopos type of character?
That is just spiders. Like he is
like
made
a
of
goblin
spiders.
made of spiders. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Like just a feather headdress on top of a pile of spiders, right? A humanoid pile of spiders.
Yeah, I'm in. Sure. Yeah, that could happen.
That's a nightmare. That's some nightmare fuel right there. Just eyes everywhere, eyes and legs.
Yes. And so then the next kit would be a giant spider cav. So 3 60 mil round base spider cav. So kind of like what the hero big boss is, but only 3 of those per box. And I think that it would be some default like the Wild Web Riders or something. I don't know. They're some weird goblin crazy tripped up on spider venom cav. And then in there you'd have like Doo Spider Licker, who's like a heavily mutated spider shaman on greater spider, giant spider, and maybe like a spider fang chieftain. So a re-release of that current like kit that they as a breakout build from this 3 giant spider box. And then finally the Arachnarok, I think that we would see the kit as it currently is. I've talked about this before. There's one build in there that's just like a TP, like a totem where you put like a goblin boss on the top, but he has no special rules. He doesn't use the lava. He doesn't use the spider shine or anything like that. And I think that we would get a named like Snagla Grobspit who's showed up in the lore like 7 times at this point. At a bunch of different books. I think we'll get a name character like that, and then I think we'd get like Pokey McVenumface or whatever. And so we'd get like a warrior.
Sure.
We'd get like a warrior boss on. So I think we'd get 3 named characters on the Arachnarok for the 3 builds, is what I would anticipate. Something like that.
Okay. Nice.
So yeah.
I like it.
So is that the so overall? How does this army play? What's your thought on this? Is it an extension of how it would sort of theoretically function now?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be heavy mortal wounds heavy. It's going to be high mobility. It's going to be multi-wound models. Probably fairly low defenses. In one sense, it's very standard destruction. It's going to be mixed arms, so you're going to have a lot of like ghetto bows that are terrible. And then also some stabby stuff. Most of the damage is probably going to be coming from the spiders themselves.
All right, rock and roll. So you're aiming for a 7 on this.
Sure.
I can't give you a 7. I'm saying I'll give you a solid 5 though. Like I'll give you the coin flip on this. Like I could see it. Broad strokes of what you're describing. Sure, yep. I'll give you a solid 5. Like it's a coin flip. They've made a lot of references to goblins and to spider fangs. They've showed up in a lot of art.
It's true.
What I feel like you're missing is the real chutzpah. But that being said, it could end up being more like akin to a Bone Splitter release,
right,
than a Kharadron Overlords release,
right? Because you're
and
talking
it's
about
important to recognize that.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. It's like releasing 3 additional boxes and re-releasing the Ragnarok with like 2 additional like character sprues.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so you're not talking about a lot of work here,
right?
Like you're talking about like maybe the on foot release box. So that's technically a new box. You're talking about the spider giant spider kit box, and you're talking about the swarm box.
Yeah, I personally would be surprised to see the character within the box.
We'll see.
Frankly, I was surprised to see it with a flesh eater quartz too. But I think in that case, because it was a dual kit, that was just kind of easier to do. I don't necessarily think they would just add it into something that already exists as its own entity currently.
That being said, you could probably construct, like, when you look at the extra crazy bits on that Ragnarok, it could easily be that it ends up almost like with just some different build instructions.
Yeah,
you could end up in like a magma droth situation pretty easily.
Sure.
Different
I'm actually
characters on foot and characters on mounted on the spider.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would work.
Yep.
But in that case, they wouldn't be on a spider necessarily. So
that's why I'm saying, like, but that being said, I think it's I've got to give you a coin flip. Like it is a pretty easy low hanging fruit because part of it is already there. It could be another Bone Splitter style release. Yeah. The question is it sexy enough for them to actually do, right? Because they would have to make some number of new kits. With Bone Splitters, they basically got off for free, right?
Yeah,
right. And even Flesh Eaters, in that sense, they got off for free because they were able to like reorganize bits.
Right.
Sure. Yep. The other thing too is that there are so many armies that could potentially be released based upon models that already exist. So I mean, it's so up in the air. Yeah, I would have to give it. Because it's in the books and everything else, I'll give it a 6.
Wow, look at that! All right, you got up to a 6,
almost a 7.
You almost got your goal. So are you yourself giving it a 7?
Oh yeah, I'm still on 7. I think we'll see it.
All right, fair enough. The commenters do not agree with your rating, but that's all right.
I'm about to pull down a Ragnarok kit and do something wrong.
All right. So here's mine. And when I was thinking about what to pick, I went through a lot of different armies and sketched out a couple of different things before the show today. And I wanted to do Slaanesh. I really did. But here's the problem. Slaanesh has to be completely reimagined, right? Like redo the Keeper. Okay, fine. But almost everything in that army needs to get jettisoned, reimagined, changed. Like what's there is almost complete garbage. And I'm honestly not sure what they would do, how you mix that combination of beauty and horror. It's a tough line to walk and tough models to do. It's not like Nurgle. Nurgle is easy. Just do a model that's half rotten and has tentacles and tongues and boils and pustules and you're done. It's like it's
I think in part it depends on what happens with the story arc going forward with like this book and the Gathering Storm.
Yep.
Right, because I think that's going to be interlinked between the overarching stories.
I agree. You're going to see something like they'll like in Age of Sigmar, they'll probably end up being related to the elves and whatever happens with the elves in some way. You've got what's going on in 40K. So like, yeah, exactly. So like Slaanesh is going to end up coming back, but I can't even begin to predict what the shape of that might look like or construct a new release for that. So instead I decided to go for lower hanging fruit. And that is, I was trying to see if I realized I probably had a model within reach, but I don't.
It's going for armored dwarves and airships.
Yeah, exactly. There he is. All right, so this is my Hell Pit Abomination, okay, for my Skaven, which is a couple of Skaven driving around a little dragon guy. And so what we're going to talk about today for my release is Clan Skyer. Skaven need some kind of release at some point in the next 2 years, I think. Skyer is a very popular faction, but they're a pretty garbage faction. And by that, what I mean is they're a faction that survives and thrives on basically one unit. The Storm Fiends, right?
Yeah.
And so from like a model selection point of view, they're just tremendously underwhelming. And from a narrative point of view, their current model range doesn't support what they are narratively anymore, right? Like Clan Skyer was the sort of epitome of mad scientist technology in the old, right? Sure. That's what the Storm Fiends represented, them rolling out these new weapons. but in combination with Mulder during the end times, right? But that technology is now millennia old. Okay, like in the current Age of Sigmar world, Storm Fiends have been around basically in the sense, theoretically or whatever. We don't know exactly how much time has passed, but probably in about the amount of time that has passed in our world since the Iron Age. Okay.
So you're saying Skaven should have laser guns?
Well, I don't need to push it to that. I don't need them to show up with like true science fiction technology. But I do need them to show up with wacky technology. Okay. They need new stuff that pushes it in weird ways. So like, and you can keep the Storm Fiends, that's fine. But their leader selection is garbage. They don't have anybody who even has a command ability, right? They basically, it's just, they have a lot of holes in the force. One of their other battle lines is these little dum-dums. Like, this isn't the real model. This is my conversion of it, but it's the little, poison wind globadiers, right? Yeah. They're just tragically underwhelming for what could be the coolest faction. So, yeah, we're gonna take to some new technology. And by the way, part of this is motivated by giving the KO somebody to fight with.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like, they can't just rule the skies forever. And if anybody's gonna get in the skies against them, it's gonna be the rats who push their technology in insane ways, right? So right now their two heroes are basically the sort of the old model for God, name escapes me, it's been so long. For Ikit Claw. Yes, for Ikit Claw, and for the regular Warlock Engineer. Now those are, the Ikit got genericized, right?
Yep.
And so then you've still got your regular engineer. Okay. And they're fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with them. It's fine. We can keep them. Whatever. The important thing about Ikit Claw's model is that dude's in basically like Mark 0.05 power armor, right? He is. Dude's rocking a 3-up save. He's hardcore. He's in power armor. Read the book. He has a framework under it that helps him move and motivate. There's armor plates on top. He's got an endoskeleton, okay? Most armor in the world does not come with an endoskeleton that has mechanical motivation.
Sure.
So, but the problem with that is that that's applied to the wrong character, right? That's the spellcaster guy running around in his power armor. Yep. No. They're going to manufacture the true Mark 1.0 here and give it to like, an actual combative guy. But it's not like to a non-spellcaster. Let me say it that guy. This guy's still not going to be great in melee, but he's capable enough of defending himself. But what they're going to do is just load this thing with guns. Like, this dude is just going to be a little mobile gun platform, right? Like, this dude is using his armor to just carry insane amounts of ridiculous armaments. He's like a little tiny dreadnought or whatever, right? Like, that's how I'm picturing him in my head. And so that would give them a real commander. Like, this would be the actual dude with command abilities. His command abilities would be standard stuff you would picture. I don't have anything incredibly creative or clever. It'd be stuff that helps with shooting or does something neat with their individual rules, probably about shooting and crap like that. The other new hero we need to introduce is the pilot, right? We need some kind of actual pilot who's going to be steering these vehicles around, right? And so the pilot would do exactly what you'd expect. That is to say, he helps the vehicles. The key point to the Skaven pilot is that he has all of his abilities have horrific consequences, right? It's carrying the current overcharge stuff into the next level. Like, he can try to tweak guns and speed and all this stuff, and every time he tweaks it, if he rolls a 1, just horrible explosions happen, things leak and rocket, the thing blows up, suffers wounds. I want like catastrophic consequences on failure, right? But if he does, he can just screw with it and push it up there, right? So, and that's the pilot's job. He's basically the guy who is screwing around with the actual ship. If you don't like pilot as a name, think engineer or whatever, mechanomancer, Ratto mechanomancer. I don't care, like whatever clever dumb name we want to give him. So for the, I'm going to skip Battle Line for just a moment. We'll come back to that at the end, because Battle Line is one of those places they need help. But I want to talk about their behemoths first, okay? And the first, like, I actually have two different behemoths. So the first behemoth is we need a walker, okay? We need a giant warpstone fueled walker,
like the spider that we saw in that image.
We're not there yet. No, just like a gun platform, okay? And the trick with it is the trick of this little gun platform is it's like really what I'm picturing in my mind is like an anti-aircraft little walker, right? Like what were the name Goliaths or whatever, right? Back in StarCraft or whatever, you know, those little chicken walkers that would walk around.
Goliaths, yep.
And they were really good at killing things up in the air, right? Like that's that kind of a thing, like anti-aircraft little walkers that are piloted by a Skaven, something like the Imperial Guards, little walkers whose name eludes me. But those dudes, they would be focused on shooting enemy big things, especially flying things, right? Like blowing, enemy bloodthirsters out of the sky, or enemy, let's say, Celestin Primes who are floating around, or of course, stupid Kharadron Overlord ships. The other big behemoth, right, which is very important, okay? So here's one way we could go with it. I'm going to screen share here. I've got a couple different thoughts we could go. Here's one. Right?
Yep. So that happened.
So that happened. We're making a Wild Wild West reference. That's right. We saw a giant weird spider Skaven construct in one of the books already, right?
Yep. And it looked not unlike that.
It looked not unlike this. Like, really like this.
There was green glowing coming from the eye.
Exactly. I would dig the heck out of a giant, crazy. It doesn't need to be a spider if that rubs you the wrong way. It can be a giant whatever. Pick anything. I wanted to use the Wild Wild West image because it made me laugh. But it can some kind of giant, just true machine of war, right? And then the third, because like I want to go machine crazy. Like KO got 3 different ships. I wanted these guys to have 3 different things, 3 different sort of machines, but not all flying boats. I think the third is their actual flyer unit, right? And their flyer unit is sort of like a mid-sized, I don't know what to call it. Like, I'm trying to think of the appropriate term. It has nothing to do with hauling troops around. Okay. It's like just a slow floating like gun platform. What's in my head is Howl's Moving Castle. Okay. Like they've literally upended part of the mountain that they were living under and filled it with enough warpstone and machines and propellers and floaty things and gas balls that it's just up in the air now being propelled along with like cannons and guns on it and crap. Right. And they've built that out into a thing. It's just literally like a big giant floating mountaintop gun base.
Yeah.
I think that feels appropriately not like I'm bringing fighter jets into the game. Like I don't want to introduce fighter jets or enemy ships. I want them to have their own thing. Yeah. Right.
Yep.
Okay. And then let me go back to the battle line now, because the battle line for these guys are going to be jump troops. Okay. Like traditional, like 40K style jump troops, like dudes with experimental warp rocket engines strapped on their backs that have horrible catastrophes frequently, but they can like fly, right? I'm putting giant quotation fingers around that one. And they just like, wow, they can just shoot up in the air after stuff. They have a massive move and they just like go around. They have little grenades, little warpstone grenades they can drop, and little warp pistols and stuff where they drop in, kind of standard stuff. They're not great in combat. They're not like combat machines like some of the jump troops are in 40K. They're more just about like havoc and mad jumpy destruction, more like moving over units and causing damage as they move, right? Because they drop their little grenades and stuff like that. Sort of an evolution of the Wind Globadier into what I see as its natural terminus, right? That to me sounds like a pretty sweet, compelling force. It pushes the technology angle. Skyer resumes its place as one of the technology leaders in the world. It focuses on like the ridiculous warp stoneness. Nothing in here would be amazing in close combat. It's still mostly preserving their focus on like range and stuff like that. Things wouldn't have great armor, and everything could backfire with increased chances to backfire if if the mechanomancer or whatever you want to call him gets in there and screws with more stuff. So there you go. There's my Skyer release. All right.
I like it.
So what do you think of the odds of that?
Jeez.
He can go back into his home here.
Give it a 5.
All right. Let me ask this question. Take what I said specifically out of the equation. What do you think the chances are of a raw Skyer release?
Probably a 5. 5 or 6.
All right.
I'm going with same score as last time, a 6.
All right. Let's go.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that of the remaining clans, I think that Skyer has the most kind of punchy, flashy grok ability.
Right.
And so it's the likely one to get an expansion. Now, whether they'll go your direction or not, that's debatable.
Sure. I feel like the core component of them, I agree. I think they're the most likely of the Skaven clans for a full release, right? Because they're very popular and they have traction in the minds of players, right?
Yep.
They also allow for an incredible amount of creativity with the kits.
Yep.
Right. Like the problem with doing an Eshin release is that unless you take that clan in some really crazy direction, it's just a bunch of different flavors of ninjas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Which we like ninjas, but
sure,
you're right.
It'd be cool, but it's just going to be a bunch of different ninjas, different rats in different pajamas is all that is. Whereas with the Sky release, man, the sky is the limit. Just
Literally.
Imagination.
And not even the sky. The sky's not even a limit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, all right, there you go. I think that is our future releases. So quick hits. Is there any other release you would hope to see? No detail, just what would you hope to see and how likely is it? Hooves, go. Pick me a random one out of the top of your head.
One of the elf armies. It's got to come out.
Sure. I'm saying 10 out of 10 that we get some elf, right? I mean, it's got to happen.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Tommy.
A city-based elf. So the Phoenicium, I think we'll get a Phoenix Temple mixed with not just elves, but an actual location-based force.
Ooh, nice. That'd be an interesting way to go.
So rather than just doing some generic elf faction that spans the realms, but it'll be very localized. Because if you'll notice the KO, and this is what has struck me, those people haven't made this connection yet. KO, the Skyports are only located in Shimon.
All right.
Yeah, that's it. This is a very localized force. You don't have a Kwashi. They have realm gates to other places.
Right.
And they capitalize that, and they talk about that in the lore, how they can go other places with these realm gates nobody knows about that are up in the clouds. But the reality is that the concentration of all of these forces are in a single plane. And I just wonder if they might do more of that, where they're like, okay, well, let's do a release. We're doing what's another Shimon release? What's another Realm of Beast, a Gur release? What's another da-da-da-da? And so I just wonder if building on the order stuff, if we might see one of the cities. We've seen Hammerhall kind of detailed in the board game, and I just wonder if the Phoenicium, which is one of those surviving cities, if we'll see a build out from that, which will not just be the Phoenix Temple, which I think it'll be that, but I think it might be even broader than that, and localized in that city itself.
So here's my quick hit, and it's funny because I'm thinking the same sort of thing. That is to say, not a traditional army release. Here's what I was thinking about, and what put me in mind of this was they just released the Shadow War rules for the assassins, right, and I was thinking about Devoted was one of the armies I went through before I did this, right? Of course, because everybody knows I would love a Devoted release, but I just don't think it's ever going to happen, or at least not anytime soon. Never is probably harsh. It's not going to happen anytime soon.
That Stormcast, that recent Stormcast release really kicked that in the teeth.
Right, I agree. But But, okay, there are still jobs for which Stormcast are simply not appropriate because they run around in their dumb Stormcast armor all the time, right?
Yeah, they are legionnaires.
They're legionnaires, yeah.
Legionnaires in cities.
So the Assassinorium, whatever it's called, that assassin grouping in 40K, were just like assassins that you could drop into lots of different armies, right? And the whole point of them was they were the super stealthy assassins who did jobs other people couldn't, right? That the normal armies couldn't. I think it would be cool to do the spin on the Devoted as a new group of like order assassins, and you could draw on some of the existing kits. Like you could bring in
with the witch hunters
and Shadow Blade or whatever, that kind of crap, right? And then you could just do a couple interesting assassin models and build them out into a new like temple of assassins. And it's like Sigmar's little hidden secret that he has these guys socked away. And their rules could be very small. They don't need a whole book. It could if they want, but it could even come out in like a simpler fashion. And the point would be they would be able to jump into other existing order factions without those factions breaking allegiance. Right.
That'd be neat. Yeah.
Just there's limits, like you can only include one or whatever, something like that, right? And they'd be a neat way to do a twist on the Devoted, right? Because they're sort of the ultra fanatical of Sigmar who are out there to do these sneaky, dirty jobs, like in the narrative, that you can't send a bright, gleaming guy in gold armor to go handle.
Yep.
But would also they would have incredible sellability because anybody playing any order army could use them.
Yeah.
Right? They can run around with trees. That's fine. It doesn't matter. Like, Sigmar's willing to loan these guys out to anybody on the good guy side who needs a dirty job done.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a sweet take. And you could pull across, like much like you said, you could pull across different races kits that already exist, build a couple new ones, and it'd be more of a theme-based release as opposed to like an army, right?
Like the Shadow Blades, like the already existing somewhat Shadow Blade faction.
Yeah, just bigger, obviously, right?
Yep.
Like,
let's hope so.
Yeah, just those two guys.
given a religious spin, obviously.
Yes.
It'd be interesting. I've pitched this before, and I still think that there's meat here, and that's the death aligned elves.
Sure.
That like who went down the path of death because they wanted to extract the elven souls from Slaanesh's corpse.
Yep.
Like I think that would be a really compelling force. It would be a new spin on elves. It would give us a new faction of death that is maybe not fully Nagash aligned.
Well, and we've talked about that before. I totally think that needs to be the case, right? Like we need something not Nagash aligned, period.
Right. And so they would provide like a counterpoint for that, somebody that's just using the powers of death for their own ends.
Right.
And I think it could be a really compelling, kind of interesting force that you can really get behind, despite the fact that it's not a good force necessarily.
Right.
Like you understand why they're doing it. They're trying to save their people.
Right.
From being consumed by Slaanesh.
So an actual characterful death army.
Yeah.
Because like part of the problem with death is that like that's why Flesh Eater Courts is kind of interesting because it had this weird story of the fallen nobility and blah 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 blah. Regular death can often be a little bland because it's just a bunch of brainless guys wandering around, right? This would be different.
Yep.
We'll rock on.
Elves.
All of that. Steal all of those ideas, GW. They're all yours. Take them all. Have them all. Just let's see them. I suspect we're going to be in the middle of some 40K releases for a while, but that's okay. I'm sure there'll be some stuff. There always is. I think they're going to. We'll be on the short end of the stick this year with the tiny interspersed releases in between the massiveness of 8th edition, but that's all right.
Well, and there's a reason why they had to be so splashy with KO. It's because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So, Hooves, want to say thank you again, buddy. It's good to have you back on the show. Appreciate you coming along. Certainly fun. For all of you out there watching, thank you all very much. We appreciate you being here. And as always, we'll see you next Wednesday.